we've got very little answers to what Syracuse men's basketball can do going forward. Jonah has shrugged his shoulders. I've done the same. A lot of Syracuse fans have done as well. And the offense, Jonah, just collapsed today. 61 points, just not acceptable, especially with the defense they played.
Yeah, I mean, it was just kind of everything bad about the season for Syracuse coming together at one. The poor three-point defense, the inability to get any sets going on offense. Like, you can maybe look at Chris Bell as a positive takeaway from this game, but I feel like we've been saying this way too often as of late. Just a game where basically Syracuse gets nothing out of it besides a big fat L next to their name.
Yeah, Chris Bell has a decent game, but J.J. Starling was up the last two, and he has his worst game of the season. It's just been a seesaw at all ends. We're going to talk about the offensive woes and what Syracuse fans can expect with this team going forward. Are there any expectations left for this squad? We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on the Double Overtime, and it starts right now.
The game may be over, but our coverage on WAER is not. Here on the Double Overtime, we'll be breaking down all the highs.
Copeland, left wing three! It's good! Quadir Copeland wins the game for Syracuse! For the first time in 1,856 days, Syracuse beats an AP Top 10 team.
Starling drives to his right, puts up a layup. No good, but Copeland with the putback slam. Oh my goodness, Quadir Copeland makes a statement.
And the lows.
Syracuse walked into John Paul Jones Arena looking to make a statement, and Virginia said, oh no you don't. Cavaliers 84, Orange 62, your final.
Well, Syracuse heads into North Carolina and faces its worst loss in its history in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Heartbreaking. The Orange bow out in the second round of the ACC tournament for the second year in a row.
Delivering our hottest takes along the way.
The expectations should be higher after a few years when Adrian Autry sets that bar, but the bar is still low.
5-star, Donnie Freeman. Yep. I mean, this guy has the tools. I think he could be the truth.
I think Lampkin and the combination of him and Carlos will rejuvenize this team and make them an actual complete basketball team.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or check out our YouTube at WAER Sports Talk. It's the Double Overtime, and it starts right now.
Welcome in to our Ostrom Avenue studios. I'm Ryan Bridges alongside Jonah Weintraub. You're listening to the Double Overtime. We'll be on your airwaves until 11 p.m. talking about Syracuse men's basketball falling 85-61 to Louisville. A good Louisville team, a step up in competition from what the Orange have had the last two games when they got two wins against Georgia Tech and Boston College. And Jonah, we got to start with this offense. But before we get into anything, you guys can join the conversation at home. Give us a call, 315-443-2011. But if you don't want to be live on the air with us, no worries, 315-556-3929. If you want to text into the show, that's 315-556-3929. You can also follow us along at WAER Sports Talk on Twitter and YouTube as well. Jonah, a lot to get into with this Syracuse offense. No matter what stat you want to pull out, no matter what player you want to look at, they just fell apart today and you know, a stretch where they were starting to play okay on offense again.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind for me is that the turnovers came back. You know, that wasn't an issue against BC last time out, and everyone was kind of getting all excited. No turnovers, the turnovers are gone. But, you know, again, step up in competition. Louisville plays really tenacious defense. You know, they're active. They are pressing you along the perimeter, and that showed itself. SU turned the ball over so much today, and J.J. Starling led the way. He had 6 turnovers by himself, which, you know, the little point guard J.J. Starling experiment, probably not something to go to long term, as today proved against a higher level of competition. But again, that's not really his job, right? Like, you don't have a true point guard on this team besides Jaquan Carlos, and he's become, or at least in Coach Autry's eyes, he's become unplayable given how few minutes he's gotten as of late.
Right, and I remember listening to an interview yesterday that Kyle Cuff did where he was talking about that Boston College game where he and Starling in that second half and those final 10 minutes were working so well together in tandem. And he said, when I was bringing the ball up the floor, that allowed JJ to kind of save his energy and get downhill. He was not able to get downhill at all. Every single dribble handoff that Syracuse would try to run on the wings, around the arc, Chucky Hepburn was just trapping. He was coming off that screen. He was beating Starling to that initial ball pressure, and Starling just didn't really know what to do with it. He had to pass out of it, and it took him out of his game.
Yeah, and, a lot of the tip of the cap to Chucky Hepburn. You know, he won Pepsi Player of the Game earlier just because, the three-point shooting was electric. His offense distributing per usual was fantastic. But, I mean, his best trait is his defense. And anyone who has watched the Big Ten in Wisconsin over the past few years when he was there and now at Louisville knows that as a point-of-attack defender, he's one of the best in the country, not just the ACC. He will get in your grill. He gets multiple steals, 2.5 a game, among the tops in the ACC. This guy is just a problem on defense, and having that type of defender at the point of attack against any ball handler an opposing team has, it just takes everything out of rhythm. And, I mean, look, we were talking about it before the show. There was no rhythm for SU, and that's become the case pretty much every time out against these upper-level or even mid-level teams.
Well, you know what builds rhythm? Is when you get easy shots. You got to see the ball go through the hoop. Sometimes you're just going to roll out of bed and you're not going to make your first few. They came out really cold. Both teams kind of came out cold in those first 5 minutes. A lot of teams just chucking threes, a lot of clanks, even on the Louisville side of things, but they started to get that inside presence. You really saw, the Cardinals use their big bodies down low, get those easy layups, and then once they got 2 feet in the paint, they started to kick out, they started to find their shooters, and that's how they really pulled away going into that first half. And then coming out of the second half, they just annihilate Syracuse. They go up 21, I think, at the start of that first half period. But when you talk about J.J. Starling, he's not a guy that's known for his outside shooting. You want him in that mid-range. You want him driving to the cup, getting downhill. No one can really stay in front of him when he gets that one-on-one matchup, but when Syracuse was trying to run those pick and rolls, that was just bringing Hepburn into Starling's grill, and I think it really messed him up in this game.
At one point, Syracuse was 5 of 10 from downtown. And, Louisville, a team that shoots more threes than anyone in the conference, that's kind of their thing. They don't shoot at a high clip, and they talked about it on the broadcast. It's not a team that will make a lot of threes, but boy, will they take a lot of threes. And Syracuse thought that they could beat Louisville at their own game, really, because after they went 5 of 21, they finished 8 of 24. So the law of averages kicked in. Like, there should not be a game where Jair Davis for the Orange, who had only made 2 threes all year, is attempting 3 tonight. And I don't care that he went 2 of 3 tonight from deep. Why is he taking those shots in the first place? It's because you're pressing and trying to be a team that you're not. And this identity crisis has been something that SU has had to deal with all season long. And yet it seems like their way of fixing it is by taking on so many identities that they don't have an identity.
Yeah, well, here's the thing is that at one point in that first half, Syracuse was only getting back into the game and making it somewhat competitive because Chris Bell was 2 for 3. Okay, Chris Bell can get hot in certain games. He's probably the best three-point shooter on the team when he's locked in.
When he's playing Louisville, he turns into Steph Curry for some reason.
Yeah, I know. He had 30 points against them last year. But then also Jair Davis, as you mentioned, was 2 for 2. So those two guys combining to be 4 for 5. That's what really kept Syracuse in this game. They were lucky to be in this game even in that first half where they seemed like they were doing okay. Was Syracuse taking too many outside shots tonight? Were they not working it into the paint? What do they got to do better on the offensive end? 61 points, not going to be good enough to beat some of the top teams in the ACC. Let us know. 315-443-2011. Join me and Jonah. We'll let you have the floor. You can go on as long as you want and really rant about this Syracuse team that, I mean, to be honest, Jonah, we'll get into the big picture things a little later on in the show, but this is just such a deflating loss, and you thought that they would just at least keep the game close. You get those last 2 wins. Okay, Louisville's a step up in competition, but just show that you can be on the same floor at home in front of a crowd that was probably bigger than most of the crowds that you've had recently.
Yeah, I don't know. You say you expect them to be close. Like I didn't go into
I'm saying that they should have tried to make this a closer game. I mean, obviously they tried,
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, it's hard to put into words, really, because there's just not enough things that we can say about this Syracuse team. what do they really bring to the table, and how do they give fans confidence going forward?
The weird thing to me is, look, Syracuse shoots 25 threes on the game, right? They finish 8 of 25. Louisville goes 12 of 28. They're the second worst and third worst three-point shooting teams in the ACC, but going into the game, Louisville shot 529 threes. Syracuse shot just over 300. So you're playing right into the trap. You're playing exactly how Louisville wants you to play, and that was evident from start to finish. And, you know, if the best game plan you have is, hey, let's beat them at their own game plan, then that's not a game plan. That's just hoping.
Yeah, well, the thing is that the difference with Louisville is that they were able to get 2 feet in the paint. They were able to have lengthy guys that could finish around the basket. They were able to get inside, draw fouls. And then once those Syracuse defenders started to bring a little bit of help, that's when you started to see the threes rain down for Louisville. It wasn't immediate, but they changed up their style. They had a counterpunch to when SU was guarding them differently. They didn't just keep trying to chuck shots and do it that way, and Syracuse just ran out of ideas, just ended the shot clock. Here, Lucas Taylor, put it up when it's contested. You know, here, Kyle Cuff, go and take it. And sometimes they go in and it looks great, but that only enables them to shoot more of them.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you almost wish that you miss a couple more threes to stop giving yourself that false confidence, because then the law of averages kicks in. You know, you're going to ultimately – the odds that you start off hot and then maintain a heater from – opening buzzer to finish, that's really low. It's not going to happen, especially against a solid defensive team like Louisville. And you kind of alluded to it, man, but the offense just looks directionless at times. It looks like wait till there's 10 seconds on the shot clock and then just have someone ISO dribble or something like that, right? Like right. Where's the offense coming from on a consistent teamwork-based fluid basis?
We got a text, our first text of the night from Jim from Camillus. He says, I've said it all year. Don't have the right coaching staff. Need a defensive coach. No communication on the floor. We need to get shooters from Colgate and Cornell. There's a lot of other things, a lot of other opinions floating around about this game, and one of them is from Doug from Syracuse, our first caller of the night as Syracuse falls big to Louisville. Doug, what do you got for us?
What's up, guys? Another depressing game being at. This is the worst Syracuse basketball team I've seen in my life. I've got a couple things. Elijah Moore's usage is completely unacceptable to me. What is the point of starting the kid if you're going to pull him after he misses a couple shots?
Yeah.
He's a volume shooter. He's always been a volume shooter. He's going to take a lot of shots, make or miss. And then to not even put him back in until there's 2 minutes left in the game, we're like, hey, we're getting blown out by 25. This could be a good time to get Elijah some minutes so he can develop. There's none of that going on. And then something really weird that happened at halftime. Lucas Taylor sat out there for a good 5 to 7 minutes just practicing his jump shot. It wasn't in the locker room with the team. I've never seen that in my life. And he comes up in the second half and misses the jumper from exactly where he was practicing from. Crazy.
So you were there on the floor and you saw that, obviously, and then, you know, with the Elijah Moore thing, what do you think, Doug? Do you think that that's kind of a hard, kind of a tough love moment, or do you just see? I kind of get where you're coming from, because at that point it's like late in the game, you're putting him back in for garbage time. If you want to shoot a bunch of threes, then why are you not putting in one of your better three-point shooters? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, and, I don't even know if it's tough love. It's not like he was taking bad shots tonight. He took 2 open threes from the corner. They rimmed in and out. He missed them. It is what it is. He's not going to make every shot he takes. But I honestly don't understand anything this team does to a point where I could be like, oh, yeah, it's just tough love. He's a freshman. He needs time. He needs to play. We're putting in Carlos or Cuff or Taylor. What is the point? These guys aren't going to be here for the long term.
Right.
I wouldn't be shocked if he transferred.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're coming from. I got one more question for you, Doug. When you were sitting in the stands, you know, did you notice any boos, any groans from the crowd? Where do you think the crowd kind of got out of the game and really started to say, okay, this is really just going downhill?
I heard a little boos, nothing too crazy. What I hear is nothing. The Dome has never been more quiet, and it makes me sad all day.
Well, that definitely says a lot, Doug.
That's a good note to end on. Doug, thank you so much for the call. We appreciate you giving us a little bit of insight. Lucas Taylor not feeling his shot and feels like he needs to get in a rhythm on his own before he contributes to, being in that locker room. If that's true, that's great insight from someone that was there at the game. A reminder that we're going to have Hudson Ridley on, our sports talk reporter. He's going to join us in studio, saw everything in the Dome, can comment on the crowd and how things were. It seemed like there was a lot of people in attendance for this game, considering it was a Tuesday. It's really cold out here in Syracuse, and this team just did not live up to the billing. You get 2 straight wins, you excite the fan base, and it all comes crashing down. Another guy that I really want to talk about here, Jonah, just for a little bit, is Eddie Lampkin. And maybe even Jair Davis, because I feel like what Syracuse started to do well at the beginning of the season and what they were finding a little bit around that Texas Tech game was they were getting inside. They were getting to the free throw line. While they maybe weren't hitting the free throws as much, it was still something that they were doing just a little bit better. Maybe Jay from Baldwinsville can give us some answers on what Syracuse has got to do better on the offensive end. Jay, what do you think?
Well, hey, I just wanted to piggyback a little bit what your last caller was talking about, Doug. I agree that, that Moore is a volume shooter. However, one thing I will say is I was up at the game, and the kid was not playing any defense. Okay, he couldn't keep the guy in front of him, and his guy was going around him. And to be honest with you, Autry's got some problems, man, because everybody's excited that Chris Bell put in 18 tonight, right? And it looked like he was getting his shot back a little bit. I think he went like 6 of 11. But listen, Chris Bell it can't play a lick of defense. So for every 2 points that Bell's getting, he's given up 2 points on the defensive end.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, really, both Bell and Moore are just right now, they're defensive liabilities in the man-to-man.
Well, here's the thing.
So that's why you see Cuff coming in. That's why you see Cuff coming in. The reason Lucas stayed in for a little bit longer, he went, I think he went 0 for 6. But he at least is a little bit of a dog on the defensive end. But listen, guys, I was at the game, maybe 9,000 people there. By the 8-minute mark, people were walking out the door. And
do you blame them?
That's a program problem. I will agree with what Doug said before. I have never seen the program in this disarray. And what I can tell you guys, on the opposite side, Louisville's got themselves a coach. Louisville's got themselves a coaching staff, and those kids were impressive to watch tonight. But on our side, I mean, we've got our starting center trying to open up a restaurant in Syracuse. I mean, how does he find the time doing that between allegedly going to school, right? He's a student. He's putting his other time around playing basketball, and now with his NIL money, he's opening a restaurant. So there's some weird times going on up at the Hill, guys. We are in some uncharted territory with this program.
Well, thank you so much for the call, Jay. Really appreciate it. And, that kind of last point, maybe I'll say too many cooks in the kitchen, or just kind of with this program. A lot of, you got guys that we've talked about with these past couple of callers, that are playing defense but can't contribute anything on offense, and vice versa, where they're traffic cones on defense, but, they give you a little bit of life on the offensive end. My question is, Ryan, the score was 85-61. So the defense stunk again, worst scoring defense in the ACC. That's not an opinion, that's a fact. And you only score 61 in the process. So, we spent some time talking about the offense. We could touch on the defense too, but if both are bad, that's just a bad team.
Well, here's the thing, okay? So Jay said a lot of stuff there, and I think a lot of it is a valid opinion. I just want to add on to that is the Elijah Moore thing, right? He plays 6 minutes. He starts the game, right? And what Adrian Autry is constantly coming to the press conference rooms, he's constantly said, Elijah Moore, he's got to give more effort on defense. He actually did say this earlier on in the year. He said, I can live with it if you give me more effort on the defensive end, but maybe you're not the best at it. That's okay. I thought Elijah Moore was really trying hard on some defensive possessions. I saw him chasing some people. I saw him, trying to stay in front of guys in the paint, guys that we know that he can't really guard as well. But why wouldn't you just put him out there and let him figure that out? Because clearly he's become better on the defensive end, in my opinion, as the year has gone on. How do you expect a kid to get into rhythm when you put him out there for the start of the game and you only give him 6 minutes? Like, it doesn't make any sense. I totally agree with this from Jay, that Elijah Moore deserves to make mistakes. He is a freshman, for crying out loud, and he's a guy that you could see back here at Syracuse next season. Adrian Autry, if you're going to be someone that's back here next season, we presume, you want to build this guy up instead of, you miss a few threes, you just don't have it tonight. Let's yank you out.
What I don't get about that either is it's not like Syracuse was blazing early on. You mentioned it earlier. They had 4 points in the first 5 minutes of action. At that point, I think and you're down 4-11 at the 15-minute mark of the first half. I don't know about you, but I'm putting in some guys that can score the ball and at least make this manageable. Trade twos for threes for a little bit. Put in a Chris Bell and Elijah Moore, and let these guys play to their strengths at least. It seems like there's just no synergy in that regard.
Yeah, well, Elijah Moore was just kind of off the ball, and I think during that Tennessee game, which was easily the best game of the season, they put him on the ball. They were doing dribble handoffs with him. They were having him make decisions. And I think they could have used maybe a more speedy ball handler, which I do think Elijah is. Obviously, J.J. Sterling is probably the best driver on this team. But Elijah Moore has more offensive talent than Lucas Taylor. Maybe he hasn't shown it in the last few games, but he is more offensively talented than Lucas Taylor, Kyle Cuff. Put him on the ball and let him get plays. I understand Elijah Moore's not playing well. If Kyle Cuff comes off the bench, he makes, 15. If Lucas Taylor is giving you, 10, that's understandable. Lucas Taylor was 0 points on 0 of 6. So how much better was he than Elijah Moore tonight? That's my thing. It's like, you didn't have a better option. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me at home. 315-443-2011. We've had a few people chime in on the guards and stuff like that. No one's really brought up J.J. Sterling. I understand he probably gets a pass after he has 26, 21 points in his last 2 games. But that was also a problem too. And this is also something that Jay from Baldwinsville brought up, was that these guys really play hard for Pat Kelsey. And I think it was more about how they defended Syracuse. Because I can understand if J.J. Sterling, has 19 points and, Elijah Moore has 0, that you want to get on Elijah Moore. But J.J. Sterling, Lucas Taylor, Elijah Moore, Kyle Cuff, those guys combined for 9 points. Those 4 players, those 4 guards combined for 9 points. This was about the Louisville defense and what they did to Syracuse.
Yeah, and it all goes back to Pat Kelsey, too. I mean, he's just, we'll get into it later, but the guy is just an awesome head basketball coach at the Division I level. Motivator, X's and O's guy, too. I mean, he was able to basically bring in an entirely new team of experienced senior transfers and have them all gel within the first half of the season. Their only ACC loss is to Duke. And Duke is looking like one of the best teams in the country.
They've beaten good ACC teams, too.
They were 12-52 over the past 2 years. They bring in Kelsey, and they already have more wins than they did the past 2 years combined.
Pitt is a good ACC team. They beat them at Pitt. That was the game that was just before this. I mean, they beat Clemson by 10 points. They beat Virginia in Charlottesville by 20. I'm not that much of a betting man, but when I saw the line was around 5.5, 6 points for Louisville, I was like, ooh, that I know which side I would take, and it's not Syracuse. So
also, all betting aside,
sure,
what does that lack of confidence say about the way that Syracuse is trending right now, to the point where it's like, okay, they're playing a quad 1, quad 2 game, yeah, write them off, because they're 0-8 now in Q1, Q2 games. They have not beat a single quality opponent all season long.
Sure,
their best win is against Georgia Tech ? One of the bottom feeders in the ACC. Things are getting really, really dire, and I don't know how urgent it's going to have to be for this team to, make any sort of major change, not just a starting lineup change, but a philosophy change, if anything.
philosophy change on offense. I think it's really about the offense. I think this team, obviously they're not great on defense either, but I just think a lot of this compounds on itself, and these guys are getting frustrated on the offensive end. Adrian Autry has talked about at times this season how their offense starts to struggle, and then the defense suffers as well. Excuse me. And I just think like it's the longer this thing goes on, the more it's on Adrian Autry. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And that's not on the players. If you're doing the same thing as a team over and over, that's not on J.J. Starling. He's not in charge of what Kyle Cuff and Lucas Taylor do on the basketball floor. He's got to control himself. He's got to help his teammates while he's out there. But at the end of the day, a coach is what can change the mentality and the strategy of a program. And the lack of plays, the lack of an inside presence with bigger players on your squad, the lack of, three-point shooting and quality shots, that goes on a head coach. At the end of the day, it just goes on a head coach.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But that's the problem you have to have when the horse isn't drinking. Right now, you're not even leading the horse to water in the first place. You're not setting it up to drink that water.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's kind of, that's kind of the frustrating thing about this team, because it's getting hard to watch from an offensive perspective, and it's directly impacting the defense, as you mentioned. It's just everything is kind of collapsing, and it's we've had multiple double overtimes this year where things just seem like the sky is falling, and it manages to one-up itself every couple of weeks.
I think this is a good time to take a break because we're starting to get into the big picture things with Syracuse. We're going to save that till the other side of this break. Stick with us, and you can call in, and you can talk all that big picture stuff when we return right here on the Double Overtime.
As the news gets more complex and changes through the day, you need more than just a quick headline check. Here and Now keeps you connected to your world between Morning Edition and All Things Considered, as the news and the people shaping it are changing in real time. I'm Robin Young. Follow along on Here and Now, NPR News weekday afternoons.
Today from noon to 2 on WAER.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
the Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
Joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at WAER.org or wherever you get your podcast.
During a busy day, it can be hard to make room for even one more thing. So it's a real plus that All Things Considered from NPR News is great for multitaskers. You can confidently add being well-informed to your to-do list and know that you will get it done. Whether you're cleaning out your junk drawer on a quick drive or something else, listen to All Things Considered every weekday afternoon.
Weekdays from 4 to 6 on WAER.
I'm Marco Werman. The World's Newsroom brings you the big picture stories and some other stuff.
The whole of Niagara Falls is ripping over my right shoulder. As an ice climber, it's the largest, wildest thing I could think of climbing, and it's never been climbed. So I'm really happy to have had the opportunity to go and stick an ice tool into it.
Join us and hear the world.
Weekdays from 3 to 4 on 88.3 WAER.
The BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
The BBC World Service makes programs with a uniquely global perspective.
Enlighten us. Where do we start?
The latest world news and current affairs.
The very best in global arts and culture.
What has been happening on the financial markets today?
Social issues, political stories.
Everything was there in a way that I never heard before.
The BBC World Service.
Weekdays after Morning Edition at 9 on WAER, your local NPR station.
Hadley hands off to Edwards, going down the right alley, crossover dribble, gets in the paint, uses his body, up with the layup, it's good. Just too physical down low for Edwards.
Well, it was a lot of that tonight for Syracuse against Louisville at the JMA Dome. U of L takes down SU 85-61, and We've got a whole lot to talk about from this game. Still, Jonah Weintraub here with Ryan Bridges on the double overtime. Thanks for spending some time out of your night to listen to us talk about SU hoops. And you can talk SU hoops as well if you want to tune in and come in. You can call in at 315-443-2011. Text us at 315-556-3929. And also check out the Twitter at WAER Sports Talk, where some of this content is going up. You saw it during the game, after the game, and, some funny post on there. Maybe one of the only times you might have smiled during that game if you were an SU fan, because
it's something that will, ease your mind a little bit, make sure that, that other fans are going through this too. It's a good place.
Yeah, Twitter, notoriously good place, Twitter. But, no, feel free to call in again. And, we wanted to take this time to talk more about the larger scale picture. We dove into what does this Louisville game mean in a vacuum, Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
But on the broader scale, so much is going wrong for this program. And I'm sure that Gary from Syracuse has some things to say about the state of this program right now.
Yeah, Gary says teams that shoot 30% on the year will always shoot better against an awful defense. JJ wasn't 5 feet from Hepburn on any of his threes. Louisville's second 5 would beat our team by 10. And then he says, FYI, Taylor was shooting during halftime because he hurt his hip jumping into his teammate. That was JJ Starling in the first half, getting loose in reference to the earlier caller. So, yeah, Lucas Taylor was not, missing out on the locker room talk at halftime because he, was just trying to get a shot for him or whatever. He was just trying to make sure that he could play the rest of the game. And maybe it did affect him tonight as he did score 0 points, but a lot of big picture stuff, Jonah.
Yeah, I feel like, while thankfully it looked like both Taylor and Starling were okay, that kind of was emblematic of the night and really the season for SU. Just two guys on the same team crashing into each other and both ending up on the floor while the opposing team is, unscathed. Because you're at this point now where Syracuse is 2-4 in ACC play, at large NCAA consideration, likely gone already, if not definitely after tonight. You're dealing with now an ACC tournament that doesn't have every team in the ACC playing in it.
Nope.
Because of the expansion to the league, welcoming in notorious Atlantic Coast members, California and Stanford. But that brings up a really important point. Where does SU stand in the ACC? Because I think the simple answer is in the bottom third at least, and that's being maybe a little generous.
I think it is being generous. I think this Notre Dame game on Saturday is going to really put to the test, okay, what is this team really like? You lose kind of close at Notre Dame earlier in the year. How do you respond? When you get a team at home that you lose close to on the road, is there a difference in your team between home and road? I think if you can protect home court throughout this season, we're going to start to see a team that's okay. I think they did gain some confidence from those Georgia Tech, and Boston College games. As bad as those teams might be, I think they did gain some confidence from it. We're going to learn a lot about this team in the next about week or so. You're going to play a lot of these middle-of-the-pack squads. I think Adrian Autry's seeing a lot of these programs maybe for the second time, although a lot of these teams are different, Louisville being, exception with the transfer portal and everything. I think he going through his second run in conference play is going to help them because out of conference, against Power 5 teams, they were horrible. But now they start to gain a little experience.
They were horrible tonight against the conference team.
But not over the last 2 games.
Well, yeah, but I guess that's kind of what I'm getting into. It's like SU is lucky that the ACC is the worst conference in power basketball right now. Like, you hate to bring up the hypothetical games. It's not like we're the SEC football world here, but you put Syracuse in the other major conferences, it's even uglier than it is right now, likely.
Mm-hmm.
So, a win over Notre Dame this weekend, sure, that's nice to get back on track. You win 3 out of your last 4. But we're talking bigger picture here. What does a Notre Dame win or a Georgia Tech win really mean if you can't even compete against Louisville?
I'm not saying it means a whole lot, but when we came into this season, we had the expectation, and I don't want anybody to say that they didn't have this expectation, because this was absolutely the attitude. This is a bubble team. That's what people thought it was going to be. Now, obviously, they've fallen way short of that. So now what happens is that expectations shift. Now we expect a little bit less of this team, so now I think they could maybe go over what some people's expectations are, which is rock bottom. Some people don't think they're going to make the ACC tournament. I'd pose the question to you. Do you think they're going to make the ACC tournament?
What, do 14 out of the 18 make it?
I think it's 15 out of 18.
Okay, I think that they can make it. Miami's basically playing with an interim head coach right now. I think they're getting throttled by Duke and Cameron.
They are.
There's some really bad teams in the ACC. Syracuse, you can't sugarcoat it. They're bad right now. But like really, really, really bad. Maybe there's a lower threshold than Syracuse. But again, if you're being happy with being in the D tier as opposed to the F tier, then that's a problem that a program like Syracuse shouldn't have. And we've seen this program kind of decay over the past 4-ish years, from the end of the Boeheim era into the Autry era, and it got to the point where you're losing every single game against big time opponents, maybe apart from that UNC game last year. But tonight was a prove me game for Syracuse, prove that you've maybe made this jump in ACC play. Starling's back. He's killing it. And everything just fell flat. And that seems like, you mentioned expectations, that seems like the expectation right now. And if you at home have any thoughts on where to go from here, if you're Syracuse men's basketball, feel free to call in 315-443-2011. Our text line as well, 315-556-3929. Again, call in at 315-443-2011. Ryan, we got a call earlier in the show from Doug that I think he described the word as depressed. It seems like we're going through the stages of grief with Syracuse this season, where, maybe after Maryland there's anger, and then after another game there's denial. But right now it's just like that depression seems like a pretty apt word to use. It just feels like there's a lifelessness around this team.
You said something a little earlier that this was a kind of downward trend from the later Boeheim years into the Autry years. How do you really say that? I mean, I understand they did finish with a losing record that one year. I think it was the first time that Jim had finished with a losing record in 50 years, or maybe the program had. And, I understand that the end of the Jim Boeheim era wasn't as great as obviously the peak of it was, but he would have never allowed this to happen.
You think so?
Jim Boeheim would have never allowed Syracuse to be this bad of a team in the ACC. Even with some of the down years, they always competed in the ACC. They always pulled out enough wins to put them in the middle of the pack
in the ACC
tournament.
With you in the sense that the eye test too. The eye test definitely was better. You're losing games, sure. We mentioned the losing record, and just I'm not backtracking on that. The program, from a win-loss perspective, downhill. But in terms of competing, that's why the win-loss doesn't tell you everything, because again, 0-8, that should set off an alarm against quad 1 and quad 2 opponents. And you're getting, tested early in the year against Youngstown State and Lemoyne and Colgate and Cornell. Has there been a single game this year that has left Syracuse fans satisfied when the final buzzer sounds?
I don't think so. I don't think a lot of Syracuse fans can come out of a game this season and say, okay, I think that if I put my faith into this team going forward into the next game, that I'm not going to be disappointed. Even if someone said that after the Boston College win just now, they still went into this Louisville game tonight and said, you know what, this is a 5-1 team. They're second place in the ACC. This could get pretty hairy even at home. I still think that there was no sort of faith that you gain from this. I want to ask you something, because Adrian Autry, I feel like with this team, had a chance to make this roster his. A lot of the players that were on the team in his first year were a lot of the players that Jim Boeheim brought in. He brought in Judah Mintz. He was kind of established. It was a lot of the same roster. It was a lot of sophomores, so it was still a younger team, but it was a lot of the same sort of structure with the players. Do you think that, him bringing in his own players, trying to develop his own system and build his own strategy, That's what's really backfired. And that's why I say that Jim Boeheim would have never let this happen, because as soon as Autry has the control and a true offseason to build out his own team, it's failed miserably.
Yeah, what perplexes me is that on paper, this is probably in the upper half of the conference in terms of pure talent on the team, right? You've got...
Ooh, I don't know about that.
I mean, I'd have to look at every single roster, but I think that J.J. Starling, in theory, should be a top, 15 player in the conference. Like you've got guys that can carry you to wins, and a lot of ACC teams can't say that, like the Miamis of the world.
Right.
But at the same time, no matter how much talent you have, I think it goes back to the game plan issue where there's just kind of no coordination on offense. You're waiting till the shot clock gets down to like that 10, 15 second range. You're draining half the shot clock plus 2/3 of it, and then wait until that happens, and you're kind of like, oh shoot, we got to start playing offense. So here comes a YMCA caliber pick and roll where it is snuffed out by the defense and you're forced into a difficult shot. Like, nothing looks easy for them out there, and I don't think that has to do with team construction. That has to do with X's and O's.
Yeah, it does. It does. This team needs to get easier baskets. This is what we were saying in our last segment, is that this team doesn't see the ball go through the hoop enough. And they're trying so hard to get back to that point where they feel comfortable out there on the floor, and they're digging themselves a bigger and bigger hole. And that's where you see these leads start to balloon. I feel like there are other coaches and there are other schemes and there are other people that would be able to rally a team together and say, hey, this is what we have to work with right now. This is what's going on the floor. Now here's what we do. How do we fix it? Because they're running these pick and rolls, I think, early enough in the shot clock, but then they, okay, that doesn't work. Now we swing it to the other side. Now we dump it down low. It's kind of just the same thing over and over and just saying, okay, what's working? Kind of making it up as they go. I think that's the best way I can describe it. It feels like the team is making it up as they go, and they're just starting to get a little frustrated with themselves and maybe a little frustrated with each other, with what's going on. And no one likes to lose. We understand, like, anybody is going to be frustrated when they lose, but there's frustration, and then I think there's confusion.
Yeah, it's like the lack of sets, the lack of organization. It screams to me like a system that was put out as like a pro style, I do that in air quotes, a pro style NBA like offense.
Sure.
Where you let your best players get the ball, do their thing, and let the defense collapse and then kick out to 3-and-D players. Okay, if you're going to do that, at least emulate an NBA team in terms of the personnel. You've got guys this is the second worst 3-point shooting team in the ACC. They can't buy a bucket from deep. So you're putting a lead guard in J.J. Starling, who's not a great 3-point shooter in his own right. There's no threat. Defenses aren't worried about collapsing on him when you kick it out and you've got a bunch of 25 to 30% shooters from the corner. It's snowballed to the point where,
And they're contested shots, too. I mean, they're quick, contested shots, end of the shot clock, save this possession. And I think that Lucas Taylor and Kyle Cuff are solid players who can hit threes at a good clip if they get it in the right spots, if they get it in the right rhythm, if they're open on a few of the plays. But when you're always covered, it's really hard to overcome it. And I don't want to get too deep into the offensive discussion because we already said a lot about that.
For sure.
But it goes back to the larger point, is that you're doing the same thing over and over again, and nothing is really changing. And they're trying to do the same thing to get them out of these holes. You see some sort of defensive adjustments with the full court press and trying to trap certain guys, but these teams, they beat the press, and Syracuse goes back into their half-court offense, and Louisville can get whatever shot they want.
It's just, a whole lot of frustration. You said it, confusion, disarray, I guess, and it kind of leads you to think I asked the question earlier, but where do you go from here? Well, at least we know that here at the Double Overtime. We know that we're going to go into a break, but don't go anywhere because we'll have plenty more discussion. Our talk reporter, Hudson Ridley, he was at the Dome to witness this thrashing by the Cardinals. Sure, he'll have some great things to say about the game, maybe not the outcome, but, hang around and he'll join us shortly here on the Double Overtime.
Weekday mornings are a juggle, sometimes even a struggle. Morning Edition from NPR News eases you into your day and keeps you company through the chaos of a busy morning. Hear interviews that give you context on the day's biggest stories, along with reporting and updates on the latest breaking news. Stay on top of the world with Morning Edition every weekday.
Weekdays from 5 to 9 on 88.3 WAER.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
The Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at WAER.org or wherever you get your podcast.
The BBC World Service, the world's radio station.
The BBC World Service makes programs with a uniquely global perspective.
Enlighten us. Where do we start?
The latest world news and current affairs.
The very best in global arts and culture.
What has been happening on the financial markets today?
Social issues, political stories.
Everything was there in a way that I'd never heard before.
The BBC World Service.
Weekdays after Morning Edition at 9 on WAER, your local NPR station.
1A is named after the First Amendment. It protects free speech and a free press. And for all the focus on the issues that divide us, it's your stories that help us understand what connects us too. We're more than just the news. At 1A, you help us shape the daily conversation. And that way, we can be sure we'll get to the heart of the story together.
From 10 to noon on 88.3 FM WAER, your local NPR station from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University.
Lucas Taylor, right wing, feeds inside to Lampkin, double team. The ball's ripped away by Noah Waterman. Gets the ball back on the fast break, elevates and slams it home.
A low point in the season for Syracuse men's basketball. That bucket right there from the Cardinals, just one of many as they take down Syracuse 85-61 in the Dome tonight. I'm Ryan Bridges alongside Jonah Weintraub up until 11 p.m. here inside our Ostrom Avenue studios. But for now, we're joined by a third member of our team, Hudson Ridley, our sports talk reporter who was in the Dome and saw the shellacking that the Cardinals put on the Orange tonight. Hudson, this was a really tough game to watch if you're a Syracuse fan. You weren't in there as a fan, but you saw all of them in the crowd, and you saw a lot less of them at the end of the game. Go wherever you want with this, but what was the vibe like in the arena when you saw it on people's faces and even what they were doing towards the end of the game?
You know, there's an analogy that I would put to this. Every once in a while, I'm not a fan of like sad or scary movies, but my girlfriend will say, well, we have to watch this movie. It's sad. Or we have to watch this. It's scary. And you sit there, you watch it, and the entire time you just feel bad. The entire time. There's nothing good about it. There's no redeeming quality. You feel depressed. The people around you look depressed. That's exactly what that game was. From the opening tip, there were a couple moments of like, oh, this is fun. Even with the small crowd, hey, it feels homey. We have a lot of people not a lot of people, but a lot of people in a condensed space. Maybe this is a feel-good game, right? They have 2 wins. I mean, there was nothing happy about this win. This loss, it was a massive loss. Everybody was out on this loss for so long.
Yeah.
Adrian Autry, he was a church mouse for the entire second half. He could not care less. No member of the coaching staff wanted to be there. No player out on the floor wanted to be there. No fan in the stands wanted to be there. And the little that were gone. Like, instantly in that second half, once the run started, they were gone.
And even the fans that maybe stick around, you know, they probably have it in the back of their mind, okay, I feel like I have to do this. I feel like I have to stay and watch this team because this is the program that me and my family have grown up watching and that we've been so loyal to.
And they paid the ticket for.
That is true.
but they do want to walk out. So even the fans that are there are still checked out in the crowd. Am I right about that?
I'll tell you what, because where we are, it's very close to the floor, and those tickets are not cheap, right? People will still show up. It's an ACC opponent. They're a very good ACC opponent, so people are expecting to see a good game. I was sitting near a gentleman who was wearing a very nice light blue seersucker suit, some fancy rings and everything. Ooh. The kind of guy that would be a BOOSTER, right? A guy with a lot of capital. He left after a couple of really tough stretches from Syracuse. He told his wife, I've had enough. I've had enough. He got up and he went. He then came back in the second half, a lot later into the second half, tried to stick it out again in his virtually courtside seats, and he could not do it again. He was so disappointed with this team. It was multiple points of that. It was families that were there that were just upset about it. And yeah, it's a basketball game, right? It's a basketball game. That's what it is at the end of the day. But the way that it made people feel inside that arena was dejected. Like, Syracuse basketball is a beacon of hope for the area. That's what it's been. It put them on the map. It put Syracuse on the map, right? Well, now what's put them on the map, people are starting to have their skin crawl when they think about some of these performances. It was dejecting. It was dejecting. That's it. That's the best way to describe it.
Well, yeah, we had a guy call in and say that the game was an atmosphere of depression.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the atmosphere of space. You know what the atmosphere is in space?
Nothing.
There's no atmosphere in space. Precisely. So, we talk about every game. Oh, what was the atmosphere like? What was the atmosphere like? I took a video of it. There was nobody in the upper deck, virtually. I saw one guy who had his head back. I can only assume he was sleeping. And this was in the first half, and I can only assume he was sleeping. I was a little sleepy, too. I'm not going to lie. I saw a lot of people in the lower bowl yawning, hands in their heads. And a lot of the Syracuse coaching staff, too, was the same way. Head in their hands. It's a lot of what I saw. A lot of head in hands, hanging of the head, just sad. Nobody wanted to be there in this game in a moment where this is Syracuse's biggest opponent that's come to the Dome this year. By far. Their biggest opponent that's come to the Dome this year. KenPom rankings, which you can say whatever you want about them. They're 34th in KenPom, right?
Right.
That's a near top 25 team. That's a tournament team. You've won 2 straight. Here we go. Crowd on their feet. Boom. Done. And it's out just like that.
SU's largest run in this game was like a 7-0 spurt.
Yeah.
Louisville had like multiple double-digit runs, or what they call kill shots. Evan Miyakawa, shout out to him. I know that we talked to him on the Ostermav pod, but they call them kill shots for a reason.
Yeah.
It kills the entire momentum of a game. And people say momentum's not real in sports, and you can argue about that. But for a fan and atmosphere perspective, 100% it's real.
And one of those biggest moments, you mentioned that 7-0 run. After that 7-0 run, it ended with a missed Louisville shot on the other end. It was a tough contest. Ball went out of bounds. It was going to be Louisville ball, but a timeout was taken. Eddie Lampkin went to the bench. He stood up, started waving his hands in the air. Hey, come on, guys, let's go. Adrian Autry slapped him on the back. He said, that's what we need to do. The crowd got into it. Everybody got on their feet.
Right.
A 12-0 run from Louisville after that. And that was the game. And not a single smile on the bench after that moment. They had everything behind them to maybe, hey, let's slay a giant. We've had a bad season. We're starting to make a run here. Let's get back in this game. Let's do this thing. And there was just no response. And I think time and time again we've seen that where it's hey, let's do this thing, right? Let's galvanize. Let's go. We saw it in BC. We saw it in some games where that should not have been the case, too. But once they get going, once the crowd gets behind them, nothing.
Yeah, and if you have a question for Hudson, if you were one of the fans in the crowd and you saw Hudson and you saw, the people and the environment and what it was like, give us a call. We'd love to hear as many opinions on this as possible, because what was once one of the most revered programs in college basketball is really falling by the wayside and having one of its more disappointing seasons in recent memory. Give us your thoughts on that, 315-443-2011. As always, let's get into the nitty-gritty about this, Hudson, why they may have fallen behind by so much kind of later in that first half, and then at the start of that second half. I felt like Louisville really made Syracuse a jump shooting team. They were blowing up every single dribble handoff. They were pressing them, coming off of screens, and it didn't work for any guard. I mean, the 4 guards, Starling, Taylor, Moore, Cuff, combined for 9 points. Those 4 players combined for 9 points. What were they doing on the perimeter to just blow up every single drive for Syracuse.
I mean, the major thing was they just put all their energy into JJ. And when JJ is not working, the rest of this team doesn't work. There was a take on the double overtime last time in the win against Boston College from Griffin Marcy where he said this kind of offense is not sustainable. And it was back-to-back 20-plus point games for J.J. Starling. That was the first time in his career, shockingly, where that's happened, right?
That's more shocking than the final result of tonight's game.
Exactly. That's very shocking. And so when you come out today, Louisville knew, okay, well, this is the only reason that they have won these games is because J.J. Starling has hunkered down, right? They focused all their attention on J.J., held him to 4 points, 1 of 7 shooting, 0 of 3 from behind the arc. And there was a question asked in the post-game press conference to Adrian Autry about, okay, well, when this doesn't happen, when the team is bad, when J.J. in specific cannot get going, what do, right? What's the plan? And he said, well, we try to get it down low, and they were forcing us out. And then everything we were trying to do just wasn't working. Well, there's no adaptability when JJ's gone. So if you take JJ out of the game, like we saw that in some games where, JJ wasn't out there on the court and the game was over just simply because he could not play and he was hurt. Well, it's the same deal if you key in on him and he's gone. Then you have nothing. This offense is really kind of nothing without JJ, and it's almost nothing in general.
But dare I say that we maybe should have seen this coming? Syracuse did shoot 4 for 20 from 3 against Georgia Tech. They were 5 for 15 against Boston College. Like, there was nothing that was too impressive on the stat sheet against Georgia Tech and Boston College. The offense wasn't good against those teams either. So maybe we built up a lot of false hope and just looked at the W and said, oh, it's not a loss. So maybe we should say that the Syracuse team was moving in the right direction. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, Kyle Cuff, after that BC game, was basically talking about, we know we're a better team than our record, and we're starting to put things together. And I think that, we could try to make some noise in the ACC. Based on what?
Yeah.
On what?
It might be worse than the record suggests.
I don't want to call anybody an idiot for being a homer. I believe in my Chicago Bears every year. That might actually make me an idiot. But if you believe in the brand of Syracuse basketball, which has a history, I don't blame you, right? But if you started to regain your faith after a win against a Georgia Tech team that had maybe one of the worst shooting performances you could find in college basketball.
Yeah, that was an ugly game.
And then a Boston College team where if you look at the games that Boston College has played to get to a record that's just above 500, you wouldn't know where any of those schools were. Right? And so you beat those two teams and you go, okay, well, that's a winning streak because 2 wins back-to-back is a winning streak, I guess. You play against Louisville and you play against some of these better ACC teams. You play against the top half of the worst conference right now in Power 5 basketball. They have no chance. They have no chance against any team in the top half of this league. They don't have it now. They didn't have it at the beginning of the year. They don't have it with J.J. Starling. They don't have it without him. No combination of players on this team can beat a top half team in the ACC. It does not matter what Adrian Autry does. The players are not there. The offense isn't there. The defense isn't there. They might as well not come off the bus sometimes, right? And the attitude just isn't there. And that's the final piece to it, is that the attitude isn't there. If you have nothing and the attitude is incorrect, you slunk your shoulders when you get down, you hang your head. Sure, they made some comebacks. They beat BC. It's a fine comeback. But there is nothing that tells me that this team should give anybody hope for the rest of the year. If they string a couple wins together, ignore it.
Yeah.
Focus on next year because that's what you have to do. It sucks that that's the reality, but that is the reality.
Yeah, we were talking about that UNC win last year earlier in the show. And, that kind of being like, and I was, mentioning how, maybe that might have given false hope to SU last year. At least that was a basis of hope. That was a foundation to build something on. If we're at the point where I said the exact thing earlier, it's like we're scraping the bottom of the barrel to find optimism about the way this program is going. Instead of, you see Louisville on the other end, they have their down years. They immediately blow up shit. They blow up everything.
Yeah.
And they make it work with basically an entirely new Frankenstein team.
Yeah, that's the new era of college basketball.
They have a head coach that sets the tone. And this is now where I want to go to this. What did you see in the difference between the way Pat Kelsey coached during the game and Adrian Autry?
How are the glasses?
It's completely different. Pat Kelsey, let me tell you what, Pat Kelsey's the man. All right, he's been a head coach for 13 seasons. I believe in 12 of those seasons,
I heard
he's
that
won
stat.
a conference championship. Right? He did it at Winthrop. He did it at College of Charleston. He's doing it at Louisville again, and he's going to make them better and better as the years go on. There is a massive, massive difference between how that game was coached by Adrian Autry and how it was coached by Pat Kelsey. Pat Kelsey did not give up when they were up big. He was still screaming, throwing fits, right? That's what you need out of your coaching. That's what you need.
Yeah. I mean,
isn't the Rothsteinism for Pat Kelsey like? Isn't it Pat Kelsey no breaks? Am I?
I don't think you're wrong about that.
It is no breaks, and that's exactly what this game was. You know.
Sorry, fellas, winter cough. No, it is no breaks. It's John Rothstein says Pat Kelsey, no breaks.
And there were no breaks.
No.
Syracuse couldn't catch one tonight. I mean, it's one thing to lose, but it looked like Louisville was out there in the second half, like trying to, until really the last minute when they unloaded the bench. It looked like they were trying to embarrass Syracuse. They were trying to make, it seemed like more of a statement game for Louisville than it did for Syracuse, which is how the reverse should have been reversed.
You can't blame the boys for having fun, right? You ever go out there? I mean, if you think about it, if you're driving in the car right now, harken back to the days where you were a young athlete. You were beating up on some bad team, right? And every move that you used to see in video games or Michael Jordan was pulling on the TV and you went, okay, well, we're up by 20. It's time to try stuff. They were trying stuff. They threw guys out there with numbers 33 and 55 who couldn't be more than 6'2" and are on the team for GPA. And boy, they had a lot of hustle going up and down that court. We thought they were managers before the game, those guys. And they suited up and they still took it to Syracuse at the end of the game because they are bought into what Pat Kelsey does. There was a difference in attitude between both teams today. Throw skill out the window. You even the two skills of these teams. The attitude of Louisville wins 10 times out of 10. And coming from a program that was in the absolute dumpster, the cellar, just a year, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
One of the hardest fall-offs of any Power 5 program you could ever imagine, to now whooping Syracuse by 24 points in the Dome. What's the hardest fall-off of a Power 5 program now?
Is it Syracuse?
For reference, they were 4-20.
DePaul, maybe.
They were 4-28 in 2022-23. 4-28.
4 wins, 28 losses. And think about how they've turned that around now. This is completely different.
Yeah, because Syracuse has a lot of transfers. I mean, I understand that some of the transfers that Louisville has, like Chucky Hepburn is better than probably any player on Syracuse.
Yes.
You know.
Probably, definitely.
There's multiple transfers.
J.J. Starling's good. But
there are multiple transfers that you could argue are better than any player on Syracuse, I would say. They're sharing the rocks, so the stats might not be there. But Terrence Edwards was literally the player of the year in his Sun Belt Conference last year at JMU, a team that went to the round of 32 and beat Chucky Hepburn in that opening round.
Yeah, I mean, this is an impressive Louisville team. Make no mistake, right? You can hate on Syracuse all you want. I can hate on Syracuse all I want. That's all I've been doing is sitting here hating on Syracuse. But on the flip side of this coin, this is a very good Louisville team, and this is one that I think they'll finish second in the ACC this year. I don't really see any roadblock in their way.
I mean, they already beat Pitt, and they already beat Clemson.
Exactly. They have one ACC loss, and it was to Duke. And that's it. And Duke's going to win the ACC. Louisville will come right in behind that, and they will be a threat come tournament time with Pat Kelsey. And it kind of brings you to the thought of the new era of college basketball. The new era of college basketball is going out and grabbing some guy that turned a mid-major into a successful school with tournaments and championships and all that. That's what Louisville did with Pat Kelsey. That's what schools around the country are doing right now, and they're becoming successful. Exactly. Dustin May. Like, those kinds of program-changing coaches are exactly what elevate even better programs now, or even bigger programs, rather, than where they were at.
Because so much is changing in the college basketball landscape that the only thing that's consistent from a team year to year is the system that their head man brings in.
Precisely.
So why wouldn't you go out and get teams that are successful at the lower level, give that coach better resources, better facilities, more NIL money, and you're seeing it culminate right in front of your eyes with Louisville.
Yeah, that's exactly what this Louisville team is. So, I mean, in reality, there's not much Syracuse can do when you have just worse players, right? You just have worse players. But the one thing that just really got under my skin, like I said, it was the attitude, right? It was the attitude of those players. And you can keep playing hard when you're down. It sucks, right? You don't want to, if you get screamed at by your boss on Friday and you think about it Saturday and Sunday, you want to go in Monday morning, 9 a.m.? No. Nobody wants to do that. Well, I mean, it's true. Nobody wants to go in Monday morning, 9 a.m. They're going, oh, boy, I'm really dreading this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's in reality what this is, right?
Yeah, I mean, but these guys get to play on such an amazing stage. They get to play on a court where, there's been so much history. Even that can't even distract them from the fact that this is not the same program that it once was, and we have the expectations from the fans and from, the local media and things like that, that this is how this team is supposed to be performing, that they're supposed to be better than they are, and they're just not. Mm-hmm. And as that starts to snowball, pun intended, with the weather outside, it gets really ugly. And at the end of the day, you see the differences between these programs. Coaching certainly becomes a factor. But also Louisville, if you just want to go back to X's and O's, they had a counterpunch. They had more of an inside presence. We didn't really see Jair Davis taking a whole lot of inside shots. He was hitting from outside in the first half, but we didn't see Eddie Lampkin have a big presence down low. I know he had, I think, a double-double in this game, but they just didn't have enough of an inside presence, and they were just chucking shots.
Which is crazy for a team that's the makeup of Louisville is a lot of guards. It's a lot of guards and a lot of wings, right? And a lot of teams are starting to go to that in college basketball, where it's a good amount of wings that are, 6'7", can shoot the ball, a couple of quick guards. That is what the makeup of a lot of teams are now, and they're ignoring a lot of the size. Louisville doesn't have a ton of size that was healthy tonight and playing a lot, and they still shut down the interior of the paint because they play aggressive. And what does it go back to? It's the attitude that Pat Kelsey brings to his team. There was a notable thing in pregame warm-up that I just couldn't help but shake. Both teams were shooting on either side, and Syracuse was getting their shots up. They had 1 million managers. I think Syracuse might have 20 basketball managers, which at that point, what are you actually doing? How many managers do you need? But I digress. I don't want to come after
the managers. Are going to come for us.
They're putting the green shirts in the stands.
Exactly. They had to lay all the shirts out. So the managers they were all standing there. A couple of them were clapping it up. Yay, guys, go shoot those free throws. On the other side, Louisville's managers were acting like this was the championship.
The Super Bowl.
They were pumping their guys up. Every shot they made, boom. All the managers were screaming, firing the guys up, getting them ready to go. And they came out the gate hot because of it. And they didn't slow down the entire game. Even when they were messing around at the end of the game, they went hard and they went fast. And that was the biggest difference. It wasn't just talent. It was obviously talent, but it wasn't just talent. It was what they brought to the table outside of the talent. It was the other intangibles that Louisville has. And that is just what if you're a fan of any team, that's what you want to see. But especially a program like Syracuse, where you've had so many players that put their bodies on the line constantly. Carmelo banged into every player at every part of the court and fought his way through everything. Marek Dolezaj lost a tooth, right? Those were the players that used to put their bodies on the line for this team. Guys don't care anymore. I'm not saying they don't care.
I mean, I saw
not at that level.
I saw Peter Majstorovic getting really frustrated with the refs, and then him and JJ, as they're walking back up the court, were talking to each other. It could have just been a simple conversation, but I thought he played with a little bit of fire. You did see Kyle Cuff when I think it was Scott, I believe, who jumped in or it may have been Smith, who jumps in the air, and then he kind of hugs him. That might just be a frustration foul. Obviously, that's not the best play to make. You don't want to injure a guy.
That was totally flagrant, by the way.
You should be frustrated, though.
Yeah. You should play with frustration.
Should we see more of that? Obviously, I'm not saying...
we don't want to, obviously.
Not more of what Cuff did, but more anger and more fight and more maybe shoving after the play, talking trash, getting in teammates' faces. Is that what we need to see more of?
Yes, but focus it. And that, I think, is the problem, is you need to harness that frustration, right? If you're mad, don't foul a guy in transition and undercut him. Play better basketball, right? If you're mad, do something about it. Don't try to hurt a guy. Do something about it. And I do enjoy when Lucas Taylor has moments where he is really into it, right? And he's pushing the pace and he's trying hard. Like you said, Majstorovic is doing the same exact thing. Jair Davis has moments like that.
But it's hard when
Lampkin will get in someone's face.
The other guys on the floor, it's hard when no more than 3 of them are kind of in that same mind space at once, and even that's rare.
You need a team of, for lack of a better term, you need a team of dogs in today's era. This isn't a team of dogs. This is a team of lone wolves, right? And if you have a team of lone wolves together, you're not going to put them in a pack. It's not going to work. And I know that's the transfer portal era where you get a bunch of pieces and put them together. And Syracuse added a lot of new pieces in the offseason that you have to throw together. You know how many scholarships Louisville had last year, players on scholarship? They had 13. You know how many of those are still here this year? 0.
Wait, I thought there was one.
Nope, they swapped all 13 scholarship players.
Must not be on a scholarship anymore. That's unfortunate for him.
Yeah. So now what? Right? If you're in that era, there's clearly those that are taking advantage of it, and there's those who are not. That is what today's game was. It was more than the X's and O's and what happened on the court. Today's game told us a story of what NIL has done, what the new era has done, who's adapting, who's not, why it works, and why it
I feel like there's some things that are consistent, though, and I totally agree with you, Hudson.
Yeah.
But there seemed to be, like, in terms of X's and O's, like an attention to detail with Louisville.
Completely.
Like, I was noticing, like, almost every single baseline out of bounds, a blob, if you will.
Yes.
Shooters were getting open. Hepburn, Rainsmith were consistently curling off screens and getting wide open shooting range jump shots.
They knew where to go. The spacing of the floor was immaculate by Louisville. That frustrated fans, I think, more than anything else, because I heard a lot of fans, when there were offensive miscues by Syracuse, and fans were really upset about, they see Louisville doing it in front of their eyes, having, perfect floor spacing, great ball movement, setting up really good looks, because that is what Pat Kelsey did at College of Charleston and Winthrop, and now he's bringing it to Louisville. That's the system that he runs, and it looked great. It looked like art. And then you look at Syracuse, and it's a couple dribbles here, a couple dribbles there, pass into the
hot
paint.
Potato along the three-point line.
Hot potato. No, you take it. I don't want to take a shot. I'm already
Dribble
0 for
handoff.
5.
Where's JJ? Where's JJ?
Yeah, dribble handoff. That's going to look like some motion here. What are we doing?
Yeah.
Chuck up a shot. Oh, it missed.
I
And
think
that was the
I
reality.
think the attention to detail thing is really good because there's a few times where on the right wing in the first half it'd be a two-man game between Majstorovic and Starling. One of them, Majstorovic hands it off. He sets a screen and then he starts to like backpedal a little bit. Moving screen gets called. It's a turnover.
Yeah.
The next one that they did, he hands it off to Starling and they miss up the exchange and Starling loses it and Hepburn just takes it away. And it's just those little details about, okay, we're not perfecting this handoff. We're not perfecting this pick and roll. We're not getting the timing right. These are all things that you can work on. And maybe the speed is a bit different in a game, but the attention to detail is there. Sometimes Hepburn is letting Starling come up the floor a little bit, but sometimes he's pressing him at half court. He's making him get the ball out of his hands. These are just little things that I think Pat Kelsey and his players all buy into, that if we do the little things right, if we change our strategy, it's going to start working. The players on the Adrian Autry side of things, they don't think to do that because there's not a coach in their ear that's telling them, okay, these are the things we got to change. These are the things that throughout the game are going to help us win.
Yeah.
That's from my video.
Side note, I just need to say, Chucky Hepburn might be the perfect point guard for Pat Kelsey as well. Those
he is.
together, they're peanut butter.
High energy, rip shots like that. That's what Pat Kelsey enjoys. The one thing you mentioned, attention to detail. One thing from Syracuse players in terms of lack of attention to detail, I don't think I've ever seen so much confusion in person on a basketball court. There were a couple examples that really stuck out.
Even not
to
at the Media Cup?
Our WAER versus Daily Orange student newspaper versus radio station media cup is really bad basketball, but every once in a while there's a little bit less confusion than what happened with the Syracuse offense. We're in no way better. I mean, we'd get blown out, obviously. But,
Really?
The one thing that I noticed, there were 2 times. Kyle Cuff had a play that he was involved in that he couldn't hear J.J. Starling. He yelled up to J.J. Starling, who was a couple feet from behind the three-point arc straight away. What's the play? What's the play? Starling didn't hear him. All of a sudden, Davis is seeing this going on, goes and sets a screen for him, and is just like, just move. Just get somewhere. Cuff is just running around the court, not even part of the play, even though he's supposed to be heavily involved. Adrian Autry just watches it and hangs his head. Because he knows there's no chance, okay, the play that I called, it's over. It happened again later on. And this is when some of this frustration started to show. Jair Davis had a play called for him to go to the low block. Lucas Taylor was screaming at him, did you know it was your play? Go to the low block. Go, come on, move. So confused. No one had any idea what was going on out there, just throwing passes random places. But again, that's what happens when you start to hang your head, and it all ties back to the fact that they were just dejected. after they got down, after Louisville went on that 12-0 run, it was over, and they just hung their head for the rest of the game.
Truly eye-opening stuff, something that we can only get from someone that was in person at the game. Hudson Ridley always providing insight, and a lot of puns tonight. You were on it.
I hate puns, but I use a lot. I know.
Or analogies.
Analogies. I like analogies, and I use a lot. I like that better.
I don't say puns, but they're similes, though. We're using like or as.
Yes, exactly. A couple metaphors sprinkled in, too. I keep the thoughts provoking.
Keeping it lighthearted in a dark and stormy night for Syracuse. They fall 85-61 to Louisville. Hudson, thank you so much for joining us. When we come back, we're looking forward at this Syracuse basketball schedule and seeing where the Orange can pick up a few W's and maybe sneak their way into an ACC tournament bid and a little bit more. That and more coming up on the Double Overtime right after this.
Thanks for listening. Not a member yet? Make a first-time gift today and help empower WAER to provide trusted journalism, music discovery, and community conversation for all, no matter where you live or how you listen, from broadcast to podcast, on air and online. Members help power everything you find at WAER. Please give today at WAER.org to support this work.
We know you've got a lot to do in a day, and sometimes it may not be easy to tune in at exactly the right time to catch WAER News. But WAER News is always available, wherever and whenever you are, without a paywall. Visit our website to use our live stream or catch up on local and national news, as well as podcasts on our website at WAER.org.
Snap judgment means your mother, your kids, the dog, and your boss are just gonna have to wait until the story is over. Join me, Glenn Washington, for Snap Judgment. Snap Judgment. Storytelling with a beat. Do not miss it.
Sundays at 10 a.m. on 88.3 WAER, your local NPR station from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University.
Selling a vehicle on your own, especially nowadays, can be a hassle, but donating it to WAER couldn't be easier. Simply provide a clean title and we'll take care of the pickup and donation receipt. To get started, visit WAER.org.
Who's gonna drive you home tonight?
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
The Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
Joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at WAER.org or wherever you get your podcast.
Welcome back to the Double Overtime here in the late hours of this Tuesday night. Syracuse men's basketball falls to Louisville 85-61. Another one of these really disappointing blowout losses for the Orange. And if you have anything to say at home about the loss or just how you're feeling about the program at this moment, chime in 315-443-2011, and you can text us at 315-556-3929. Once again, that's 315-443-2011. Jonah Weintraub here with Ryan Bridges. And Ryan, let's take a look now. We've talked so much about this Louisville game with Hudson Ridley, our reporter, who was fantastic and brought awesome insight. We've talked about the X's and O's, the coaching, what this means for the program. What about what this means for Syracuse going forward? Because the conference slate is picked up and is in full action, and you have the Notre Dame game on Saturday.
Right.
But then a really, really tough slate. You got a trip to California, and it kind of caps off in the early parts of a couple of weeks with Duke, and that being possibly the most difficult opponent SC will face the entire season.
Right, and I think the only real toss-up game that I see in all this is really the next one, is Notre Dame. every other game, I feel like in these next 6, and we'll go down the list. They got Notre Dame at home, then at Clemson. You're at home against Pittsburgh, and then you're at Stanford, Cal, then you face Duke. I feel like I know the result of the other 5 games. It's just this next one against Notre Dame. You only lose by 5, in Purcell Pavilion. I think they have a chance.
I mean, they were without JJ in that game.
Right.
But Notre Dame was without Marcus Burden, who was an ACC all-freshman team last year and is one of the best scoring guards in maybe the entire country. He's back, pending anything crazy, for this upcoming game on Saturday. So the 2 best players from the teams both coming back. Do you think that just cancels out, or and kind of makes it a toss-up? Or do you think one has more of an impact than the other?
Who else is missing? Donnie Freeman, and they had him in that game. So I think that could give it to Notre Dame. Does Syracuse have anything that gets you really excited about them playing at home? Do they really have an advantage? Because everyone is kind of checked out with this program, and fans don't really want to go to these types of games anymore, and they're might be afraid that the team's getting blown out. I mean, Louisville is a different class of opponent than Notre Dame, and I think some fans will expect a good game. But if it's a lesser opponent, how many fans are going to show up? Like, it all kind of will just kind of fluctuate. This Notre Dame game is a toss-up. I wouldn't be surprised if they win it. I would not be surprised at all if they lose it.
I mean, this Notre Dame team, they really shoot the 3-ball well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 36%, 37%. They've got multiple guys like Matt Olaco, Braden Shrewsbury, who had an awesome day against the Orange in that first meeting.
Yeah.
So the 2 guards coming back for that one, and it kind of leaves you with like, okay, and Donnie Freeman could be back. He's listed at day-to-day. Wasn't here for today's game, obviously, and not sure that it would have made much of a difference considering it was such a big loss to the Cardinals. But as you said, Notre Dame, we could probably list that down as at least a toss-up. Maybe lean Syracuse.
Yeah, I think toss-up is a good one. They did go to Boston College, or no, they played Boston College at home today, and they won 78-60. Syracuse beat them by 8. Notre Dame wins by 18. So take that for what you will. You want to use transitive property. Notre Dame already beat Syracuse this season, but there's always that revenge factor. You never know how the team is going to look their second time out. So I'm interested to see what Adrian Autry can do. You're seeing a team for a second time this season. This is the first time that you get a second crack at an opponent. Let's see what the changes can be. Even though you don't have Donnie Freeman, you have J.J. Starling, who didn't have in that game, obviously. So let's see what Syracuse can do in that game. What we got next on the schedule?
Next on the schedule, at Clemson.
Loss.
I mean,
we maybe we should have said 3-2-1 and said it together in unison.
Clemson's a really good team, maybe
really
not.
Good.
Maybe they could win a couple games in March if they make it. I know they're kind of on the bubble right now, but again, it's one of those teams where it's like, what is the path that Syracuse wins in Little John Coliseum?
It's not a lot. I mean, they're going to have to shoot the lights out. I think, honestly, to have, to beat a top-flight ACC team, this squad is going to need to have one player like, a Chris Bell last year where he hit like 8 threes in the first half against Louisville, or it was NC State. They were at NC State, right? A relatively middle-of-the-pack opponent. And Chris Bell just goes out and just hits a bunch of threes and really changes the momentum of that game. That's something that can power you to a win. They're going to need a player on their team to just go unconscious for them to beat a top-flight ACC team. That's what's going to have to happen because they're turning into a jump shooting team. Someone is going to need to catch fire, and it's not going to really happen down low.
And speaking of top-notch ACC teams, after that Clemson game, back home, but you're taking on Pitt, arguably, I'd say the 3rd best team in the conference.
I would put Louisville at 2 after Duke, and then I'd probably put Clemson. I think they've got better top-flight players in Shefflin and Hunter, but I do think Pitt is a very solid team. They were 12-2 going into that Duke game, which they lost not too long ago, and then they got caught by Louisville. So they're losing against the top-flight teams, but I believe Pitt's at home in that game. Or no.
That's the home game versus Pitt.
Yeah.
There is a later away game at the middle of February.
Sure. I think Pitt gets it done. We mentioned how Syracuse, if it's a solid Power 4 team or Power 5 team that's going to be on the bubble, take the other team. that's how it goes.
Easy advice from Ryan Bridges here on the Double Overtime airwaves. Speaking of some advice, Syracuse might need some travel advice because they'll have back-to-back games at Cal and Stanford later on after that Pitt game. A little, I wouldn't say road trip, but flight trip out to California, and first at Stanford, then at Cal. Two teams, again, not really doing great in ACC play. Cal lost to Cornell at home, and Cornell obviously
fell to Syracuse.
Had that notorious 42-game losing streak against ACC opponents, most of those being against Syracuse. Some good players on both those teams, kind of, again, but the road factor, again, neither of them really big home court advantages, kind of not basketball schools, but again, can you rule out? It feels like you can't chalk up any of these. It's like, oh yeah, Syracuse should win this pretty comfortably.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can say they should be favored. I think they should definitely be favored against Cal, and I think they probably will be, even with the home court advantage. Stanford has rattled off maybe a few wins. They beat Virginia Tech. They beat Virginia. Other than that, they beat Cal, who's the other team that we're talking about. But other than that, they don't have a ton of quality wins on their schedule. I think you could see Syracuse honestly go 2-0 on that road trip. It's a lot of miles, but I think Adrian Autry is going to be able to convey a message that, hey guys, we're coming all the way out here to California. Let's get some wins. It's time to turn the page, especially when we probably expect back-to-back losses against Clemson, against Pitt. They're going to have a break after that. I think they're going to want to end on a good note. End the trip on a good note. So I definitely think they split on that road trip, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go 2-0.
Well, they want to probably pick up a little bit of momentum on that road trip because that momentum will, in all likelihood, be squashed immediately after when Duke comes to town. One of the top 3 teams in America, arguably the best player in America that's active right now. And as Auburn's Janai Broom out with that injury, Cooper Flagg suddenly becomes a Naismith potential winner as a true freshman.
Wooden Award, yeah.
Just swept.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah,
just swept the ACC Player of the Week and Rookie of the Week for back-to-back weeks. Malik Brown, he's injured, but maybe he'll be back healthy in time for his little homecoming to Syracuse. And
right.
I mean, that would be the totally off the path here. But if SU managed to win that game, that would be one of the funniest wins in Syracuse basketball history. A win over that level of Duke team with absolutely no implications outside of the vacuum. That'd be very unserious of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think if the other 5 games that come before that, if they go the way we think, let's say you beat Notre Dame, you lose Clemson, lose Pitt, and you split in the California road trip. If you come into that game, Duke is going to be favored by 12.5, maybe 15.5 points in Vegas. And I think a lot of people would take Duke to win that game, even though it's, a lot of people might pack the dome. There could be 25,000 fans in there. You would take Duke in that game with Cooper Flagg, without them, because that their bench is probably comparable, if not better, than what Syracuse has out there, as a texter also said to us tonight about Louisville's team.
Hey, you kind of at the point where those 25K fans would probably be coming more from the fact that it's a Duke matchup rather than it's Syracuse playing, which, again, ties back into what Hudson Ridley was saying when he was reporting about the really state of things here in the 315 for the men's basketball program and, this upcoming schedule between Notre Dame and Duke. Not easy. We just kind of went over it piece by piece, but traveling all the way to Cal for multiple games, not necessarily an easy thing to do during the middle of the year. You've got home game versus Pitt, one of the best teams in the ACC, road game at Clemson, one of the best teams in the ACC. This is going to be a really trying stretch for Syracuse and a team that really probably could just use some more momentum wins than anything. At this point, you just kind of take, ideally you hope for a winning record on that 6-game stretch, but it seems like moral victories are going to be the ones that are more important at this point.
Yeah, moral victories, and then also at the same time, the adjustments. What can we try that is new, that is going to work? I think that is the thought that is going through a lot of these Syracuse fans' heads, and I think it's a lot about building to the future. Donnie Freeman, he'll probably want to go to the NBA after this. That's, it's not certain, but he's playing well enough right now that he's going to get a lot of interest from the NBA draft. Maybe he wants to come back another year. Maybe he wants to hop in the portal. Who knows what's going to happen with Donnie Freeman? But there's a better chance that he's not on the team next year. When it comes to a guy like Elijah Moore, when it comes to a guy like a J.J. Starling, how are those guys blossoming to where when Kai and Anthony and Sadiq White come in next year, I think a lot of fans just want to see some type of optimism, some type of thing to look forward to.
To build off of.
Yeah, this season, I'm not going to say it's over because they're not mathematically eliminated. They control their own destiny, if you really want to say that. It's all in front of them. But at the same time, we know how this season is going. We know the trend that is happening right now. And some Syracuse fans just want to say, okay, we just want to wipe the slate clean next year and have a better roster going into the 2025 season. And so I think those are the types of moral victories that fans want to see. Do we play better defense? Do we do a better job about getting the ball down low? Are guys fighting more? Are we not getting trounced by top-flight ACC teams? These are the moral victories that Syracuse fans are going to take. Are fans going to want to watch for a moral victory? No, I think Syracuse basketball fans watch because they want to see their team win, and it doesn't matter if it's by 1 point or by 24 points tonight. They want to see their team win. So sports are a results-based business, but these fans will be here next year, but they just want to see something that can contribute to that next year conversation.
Well, we already touched on it. The year-to-year turnover in this sport is becoming pretty much the Wild West at this point, so who knows what this team will look like next year. But at a bare minimum, you mentioned it, just trying to escape the next couple of months with any sort of semblance of life. You saw the 0-8 against Quad 2, Quad 1 opponents, mentioned that multiple times, because it really does speak to the clear drop-off between some of these better teams that SU has faced and where SU stands right now. But we're going to head to a quick break here on the double overtime, and then we'll be back to wrap up shop after Syracuse gets trounced by Louisville at the Dome. Final score, 85-61. Don't go anywhere. Got a little bit more for you here on the double overtime.
We know you've got a lot to do in a day, and sometimes it may not be easy to tune in at exactly the right time to catch WAER News. But WAER News is always available, wherever and whenever you are, without a paywall. Visit our website to use our live stream or catch up on local and national news, as well as podcasts on our website at WAER.org.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
the Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
Joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at WAER.org or wherever you get your podcast.
Thanks for listening. Not a member yet? Make a first-time gift today and help empower WAER to provide trusted journalism, music discovery, and community conversation for all. No matter where you live or how you listen, from broadcast to podcast, on air and online, members help power everything you find at WAER. Please give today at WAER.org to support this work.
Welcome back into the double overtime. We're wrapping up shop here, going for the next 15 minutes or so to the top of the hour here on WAER Syracuse. Jonah Weintraub and myself, Ryan Bridges, talking everything Syracuse men's basketball. We're going to sum up every single thing. We're going to try to sum up every single thing that we've thought about in this show, that we've talked about with our reporter Hudson Ridley, into final words, our little one-sentence resolutions that we come out of this game with, and we're going to start with Jonas.
Yeah, I think I was on the double overtime as a reporter for the UMD game in Brooklyn. That seemed at the time like the worst loss of the season for Syracuse. Maybe still is.
I think it still is.
Tonight's is up there. And so I was thinking about this because there's so much kind of loss around this program. It seems like the program is lost, and it seems like the fans are mourning almost every single game. There's so much depression, as we heard earlier on the broadcast from one of our callers, in the air. So what do I think about what's actually going on the floor? And what I came to the conclusion of tonight is that SU is the easiest team to game plan for in the entire ACC.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's pretty straightforward. They are the second worst three-point shooting team in the ACC. They're shooting below 30%, maybe above 30 after this game, but barely around 30% for the season from deep. Okay, don't have to worry about shooters. Well, at least there's maybe someone distributing the ball around, making it, kind of the offense hum. There's also not that. Jaquan Carlos started for most of the season, was taken out of the starting lineup. The assist numbers were lower than they were when he was at Hofstra, and nobody really swinging the rock around for SU. It was just kind of hot potato along the three-point line until someone jacks up a shot or they say, hey, JJ, where are you? Can you take over? And then JJ's Starling. We saw it tonight in full force with Chucky Hepburn all up in his grill. You cut off the head of the snake, and everything collapses from underneath it. JJ had 6 turnovers, was basically lifeless offensively, and after back-to-back 20-point games where he carried the team to wins, it was very easy to say, hey, let's key in on this guy and this guy only and make everyone else beat us. Because, spoiler alert, they didn't, they couldn't, and they probably wouldn't if these teams faced off under the same circumstances once again. And then on top of it all, SU has the worst defense in the ACC. They allow nearly 80 points per game, so you don't even have to worry about your offensive game plan when you're going in to face Syracuse. All you have to worry about is stopping JJ Starling and maybe making sure that the guys that are the supporting pieces don't catch fire from 3 in an absolutely abnormal way. But Syracuse is the easiest team to game plan for in the ACC.
I think that's very true because they don't change a lot game to game. You see a lot of the same plays, and I think that kind of contributes to the seesaw that you see with a lot of these players where Chris Bell will go into the tank for 4 games, and then all of a sudden he pops up and he has 18 points. And then, he goes into the tank for another game. You see Lucas Taylor, I think the last 4 games he had double-digit points. He had 0 tonight. He took a tough shot in the hip. We hope he's okay. If that contributed to it, we obviously understand. But, these players fluctuate on a game-to-game basis. Some of them get the opportunity to thrive and kind of shoot their way out of it. Some of them didn't tonight, and then Elijah Moore just didn't get the opportunity really to. And Kyle Cuff, who's had a solid, last half dozen games, kind of went into the tank tonight too. So I think a lot of the same strategy contributes to, okay, this guy's just really hot tonight, and then as soon as you need him to be hot while another guy's playing well, it just doesn't happen.
There's no true secondary scorer on this team. The numbers might make you think that, but there's no guy that if JJ is taken out of the picture, that is how to stop Syracuse. You stop JJ, you stop the Cuse. It's a one-man show, basically, not by choice, because it's not really successful, but by the fact that that's just how this roster has shaken out. It's unfortunate for SU, but that's the reality we live in right now.
Especially with Donnie Freeman out. Exactly. And, we know that he did want to play in this game very badly because there were some scouts that were going to come see him. And there were going to be some people who really wanted to see Donnie. It's a big game for Syracuse. And I think he tried his absolute hardest. The report that Syracuse men's basketball put out was that he's making progress. He's going through the rehab stuff, but he's just not quite ready. There's no reason to really risk it. It's not a huge difference. They would have lost with Donnie tonight, but I totally agree with you. My final word, it kind of coincides with what you were saying, but the longer that this goes on this season, and when I say this, I mean doing the same thing and think it's going to change. The longer that Syracuse does the same strategy on the offensive end, on the defensive end, and has a lack of a plan and has, a lack of an attitude and an identity throughout the season, the more it goes on Adrian Autry. Because these players, like it or not, they're getting a little bit more comfortable being out there. They're comfortable now playing with each other. They have plenty of experience, and they know the tendencies of each other. How does a head coach and a coaching staff bring them all together? That's what we have to wonder. And the longer that goes on this season, the more blame goes on a coach like Adrian Autry. He is going to be judged. I don't think he's going to be judged by the games like tonight. Obviously, It's a bad loss. It's a really bad loss. But whether you lose by 10 or you lose by 24, this fan base is not going to be happy. It's about W's and L's, especially with a program that's as prestigious as this. Do you play well against those middle-of-the-pack teams coming up, like Cal, like Stanford, like Notre Dame on Saturday? That's how Adrian Autry is going to be judged, and that's how he's going to be judged going into year 3. Because assuming that he sticks around for year 3, with Kai and Anthony coming in with Sadiq White, guys that he's recruited, right? He's not a bad recruiter. He's put together a solid roster, I think, this year, but he hasn't been able to have them gel all together. But again, even when you recruit those players, you still have to make sure that they work well together and show that you are a good in-game and even out-of-game coach in between these weeks. It goes on Adrian Autry at the end of the day. And the longer this goes on, the more blame is going to be heaped on him. And it's already starting to heat up. I think, the outside noise, it's already heated up a lot. And if this Syracuse team just continues to struggle, he's not going to give Syracuse fans many reasons to want to be excited that he's coming back as the head coach if he does.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, again, we talked about the upcoming slate for SU just moments ago here on the Double Overtime. Not easy at all. You play a couple middling teams. And
you play some good ones.
And you play some good ones, too. It's the ACC. It's, might not be the strongest conference in Power 5. Might be the weakest in the Power 5. But it still is going to present opportunities on a game-to-game basis to have an adequate level of competition, unless you're playing Duke, in which point you're basically playing the Monstars. But I totally agree with what you're saying in the sense that there's not a lot of wiggle room now. You said wins and losses. It's results-based. You got to win a few of these and maybe a few of these that you shouldn't.
Yeah.
If you want to give
that's true.
Any sort of optimism going forward, because you're right, so much of this has to do with the players and the personnel, but at the same time.
But at the same time, also, what's so funny about this is that that's what he did in his first year. He beat this number 7 UNC team at home. Like you said earlier in the show when we had Hudson on, there is a world where Adrian Autry can coach a team to these types of wins, but it happens with players that already know how to play together. It's not all on him. It was his first season coaching. He was kind of playing with house money. In your first year as a head coach, taking over and filling the shoes of the most legendary coach in Syracuse athletics history, you're kind of playing with house money. Now the pressure is on you to put this team together and make them gel. The team that you recruited, the team that you built, the team that you said this offseason that you went out to build, and it hasn't gelled the way that you thought. Is it all on Adrian Autry? No, some of these players have not played well enough and have not lived up to the billing, and it's not all on him. I think there's a few of these players that have their own personal struggles that are leading to some of their downfall, but at the same time, it falls on a head coach to make sure that this isn't a recurring problem. And when I say the longer this goes on, the more blame goes on Autry, that's what I mean, is that the longer this goes on, the more that SU fans are going to start to heap blame on the one constant year to year, and that's your head coach.
Can't let it become chronic.
Nope. No more words.
Yeah, no more words.
Yeah.
Our final words, fittingly, were the final words.
Yeah, they were. But let's turn our sights to Saturday. Syracuse takes on Notre Dame. McCluger Modeling countdown to tip-off at 3:30. That's a 4 o'clock start inside the Dome. The double overtime will be going till 8. We mentioned the matchup. Marcus Burton supposed to be back for Notre Dame. Micah Shrewsbury, excuse me. Or Braden Shrewsbury. Sorry, I'm just getting them all mixed.
Too many Shrewsburys.
Yeah, too many threes from Shrewsbury last time out against Syracuse. They got to do something to limit him. I mean, do you think that we could see Traps trying to get the ball out of his hand? How does Syracuse shut him down? Because I think you have to have Lucas Taylor in the game. I think you have to match up those minutes very well because Lucas Taylor is definitely the best on-ball perimeter defender on this team. I say if you're Adrian Autry, you match those minutes. In those remaining minutes, you have Kyle Cuff, J.J. Starling try to work off each other and maybe try to get Elijah Moore more involved.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be a get-right game for the Orange against an opponent that has already beaten them. So how much of a get-right is it going to be? In theory, 100%. In practice, SU fans can only hope it's 100% as well, because guess what? We touched on it. Things don't get easier from here at all, whatsoever.
No, they don't. But hopefully they have Donnie Freeman back. They said that he was making some progress. Hopefully that progress heats up as they get to Wednesday, Thursday. This game's all the way on Saturday. It's Tuesday right now, obviously. So
lots of time to mull over things.
Yeah, he's got some time to get back, get ready, and that'll be a game that Syracuse needs to win if they want some more positivity, more optimism around this program heading into a very, very tough stretch. Some thank yous to hand out on this show as we wrap things up here. Shrikar Rajendran, our producer, doing all the right things, getting us ready on the phones and allowing us to talk to all these great Syracuse fans. Max Gifford pushing the buttons on the board. I think he had a perfect dot performance, contrary to what other people believed earlier in the game. We're just making jokes out here. Our reporter Hudson Ridley had every analogy known to mankind. We thank him for coming on here, bringing a lot of energy. And then our WAER Sports Talk desk, Dan Schaller, Drew Alba, and Josh Rajanov. Great job, guys, on everything behind the scenes. And a great show from us here on the Double Overtime. Again, join us for Syracuse and Notre Dame this Saturday at 3:30. Jonah, any last words? All right, that's enough from us here inside the WAER studios. We'll see you next time.